They say that living sometimes feels like pushing a stone uphill. You try with all your strength. You whisper to yourself that the top is near, and for a moment, you even believe it. But when morning comes, the same hill stands before you, again unchanged, perhaps steeper, perhaps heavier. That's how Elara had felt for weeks. She lived alone in a lighthouse, at the edge of the world, a tower of quiet light that watched over the restless sea. Every morning, before dawn, she would climb the spiraled stairs, her lantern swaying with each step, and light the great lamp that guided sailors through the fog. The air always smelled of salt and iron. The waves below murmured secrets she could never quite understand. Every dawn began the same way. The sound of the sea breathing, the hum of the wind brushing the glass, the slow rhythm of her own heartbeat echoing through the empty corridors. And every morning, she asked herself the same question. Why does everything feel so heavy? She wasn't unhappy. She wasn't broken. She was simply tired of feeling like life was something she was always chasing but never reaching. One night, after a long day of storms, the ocean finally fell silent. The clouds drifted apart, and the moon laid a silver path across the dark water. Elara sat outside the lighthouse, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea still steaming in the cold. The world was still. That's when she saw the old keeper approaching, the man who came from the mainland once a month to bring supplies and stories. His beard was white as foam, his eyes calm as the tide. He stood beside her for a while without saying a word. Then, in a low, steady voice, he said, "You are not weak. Elara, you've just forgotten how to move slowly." She frowned softly. "Slowly?" "Yes," he said. "You rush through your days as if peace waits at the end of them. But peace isn't found in arrival. It's found in the way you walk." She stared at the reflection of the moon trembling on the waves. "Then what should I do?" she whispered. "Walk slowly," he said, "and get a little better with every breath." That night, he told her a word she had never heard before: Kasan, the art of continuous improvement. He explained the power of small, steady steps. When he left the next morning, his words lingered in the air like mist. Elara thought about them all day as she cleaned the glass of the lamp and mended the ropes by the pure Kasan. The sound of it felt like the rhythm of the waves, soft, patient, endless. Kasan isn't about running faster, she realized. It's about breathing deeper. It's not about perfection. It's about kindness to the self that tries. In modern psychology, they might call it micro habits, tiny, gentle actions that rewire the brain without waking its fears. Because the mind fears big change. It mistakes it for danger. But when progress is quiet, subtle, almost invisible, the mind relaxes and the soul opens like a flower that no longer feels the need to hide from the sun. That's the beauty of Kasan. It teaches you to grow without breaking yourself. Elara began to see her mind as a garden. If you demand a garden to bloom overnight, you crush the roots before they've even taken hold. But if you water it a little every morning, without hurry, without punishment, something lasting will rise. That is the quiet promise of Kasan. Growth without haste, progress without guilt. Every dawn, Elara performed her ritual. She checked the lamp, polished the lens, trimmed the wick, and cleaned the brass that held the great light. At first, it felt repetitive, the same motions, the same steps, but one morning, she noticed her hand moved more softly than before. Another day, her breath matched the rhythm of her actions. Soon, she realized she was no longer performing chores, she was practicing meditation. Every small movement was a lesson. Every repetition was a whisper of peace. That was Kasanda, art of improving, not through speed, but through devotion. Modern thinkers call it mindfulness, the art of being present in every gesture. But to Elara, it was simply a form of prayer. The light she tended became the mirror of her inner world, calm/steady, unwavering. The old keeper once told her about an American engineer named Deming. He helped rebuild Japan after the war, he had said, and he taught something that changed everything. It's not strength that builds systems, it's consistency. Elara carried those words with her like a compass because the same rule applies to the soul. The mind doesn't grow through intensity, it grows through repetition. Every small act of kindness, every patient choice is like a root stretching unseen beneath the soil. For a long time, there's nothing to see. The earth looks empty. But one day, without warning, the first green leaf breaks through. The bamboo, she remembered reading once, spends 4 long years growing its roots underground before it dares to rise. Then, in the 5th year, it shoots up dozens of feet in mere weeks. People look at it and say, it grew fast. But it was slow all along. So are we. In her early days, Elara wanted to change everything at once. She wanted to wake up earlier, meditate longer, read more, write more, do more. She wanted to become everything she wasn't yet. But by the end of the week, she was exhausted. Her spirit felt dry, and her hands trembled from trying too hard. Why did I fail? She asked the keeper the next time he came. He smiled, looking at the horizon. Because you tried to bloom before you built roots. And in that moment, Elara understood. That's how most people live, she thought. We set grand goals, promise ourselves change, and when we fall short, we mistake fatigue for failure. We think we lack willpower, but what we lack is patience. We chase leaps instead of steps. And when we stumble, we punish ourselves. But the mistake isn't in us, it's in the method. The human body was not made to run without rest. The soul, even less. Kaizen is the antidote to hurry, the quiet rebellion against the culture of speed. It is the science of continuity, the philosophy of compassion for your own rhythm. Elara remembered the words of modern thinkers James Clear, B.J. Folk, men who studied change and found that it doesn't start with goals. It starts with identity. Don't say, I want to be disciplined. Say, I am someone who shows up, even if it's only for 1 minute. Because every small act is a vote for the person you are becoming. And under the watchful beam of her lighthouse, Elara finally smiled. For the first time in a long while, she wasn't racing. She was arriving one breath at a time. When you do a single push-up, read 1 page, or take 1 mindful breath, it seems like nothing. But deep within, something invisible begins to change. You start to see yourself as someone who keeps promises, especially the quiet ones you make to yourself. And that, Elara would learn, is the beginning of freedom. They say that living sometimes feels like pushing a stone uphill. You try with all your strength. You whisper to yourself that the top is near, and for a moment, you even believe it. But when morning comes, the same hill stands before you, again unchanged, perhaps steeper, perhaps heavier. That's how Elara had felt for weeks. She lived alone in a lighthouse, at the edge of the world, a tower of quiet light that watched over the restless sea. Every morning, before dawn, she would climb the spiraled stairs, her lantern swinging with each step, and light the great lamp that guided sailors through the fog. The air always smelled of salt and iron. The waves below murmured secrets she could never quite understand. Every dawn began the same way. The sound of the sea breathing, the hum of the wind brushing the glass, the slow rhythm of her own heartbeat echoing through the empty corridors. And every morning, she asked herself the same question. Why does everything feel so heavy? She wasn't unhappy. She wasn't broken. She was simply tired of feeling like life was something she was always chasing but never reaching. One night, after a long day of storms, the ocean finally fell silent. The clouds drifted apart, and the moon laid a silver path across the dark water. Elara sat outside the lighthouse, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea, still steaming in the cold. The world was still. When she saw the old keeper approaching, the man who came from the mainland once a month to bring supplies and stories. His beard was white as foam, his eyes calm as the tide. He stood beside her for a while without saying a word. Then, in a low, steady voice, he said, "You are not weak, Elara. You've just forgotten how to move slowly." She frowned softly. Slowly. "Yes," he said, "you rush through your days as if peace waits at the end of them. But peace isn't found in arrival. It's found in the way you walk." She stared at the reflection of the moon trembling on the waves. "Then what should I do?" she whispered. "Walk slowly," he said, "and get a little better with every breath." That night, he told her a word she had never heard before. The art of continuous improvement, he explained. The power of small, steady steps. When he left the next morning, his words lingered in the air like mist. Elara thought about them all day as she cleaned the glass of the lamp and mended the ropes by the pier. Kassan, the sound of it felt like the rhythm of the waves. Soft, patient, endless. Kazan isn't about running faster, she realized. It's about breathing deeper. It's not about perfection. It's about kindness to the self that tries. In modern psychology, they might call it micro-habits, tiny, gentle actions that rewire the brain without waking its fears. Because the mind fears big change. It mistakes it for danger. But when progress is quiet, subtle, almost invisible, the mind relaxes. And the soul opens like a flower that no longer feels the need to hide from the sun. That's the beauty of Kassan. It teaches you to grow without breaking yourself. Elara began to see her mind as a garden. If you demand a garden to bloom overnight, you crush the roots before they've even taken hold. But if you water it a little every morning, without hurry, without punishment, something lasting will rise. That is the quiet promise of Kassan. Growth without haste, progress without guilt. Every dawn, Elara performed her ritual. She checked the lamp, polished the lens, trimmed the wick, and cleaned the brass that held the great light. At first, it felt repetitive, the same motions, the same steps, but one morning, she noticed her hand moved more softly than before. Another day, her breath matched the rhythm of her actions. Soon, she realized she was no longer performing, or she was practicing meditation. Every small movement was a lesson. Every repetition was a whisper of peace. That was Kasanda, art of improving, not through speed, but through devotion. Modern thinkers call it mindfulness, the art of being present in every gesture. But to Elara, it was simply a form of prayer. The light she tended became the mirror of her inner world, calm, steady, unwavering. The old keeper once told her about an American engineer named Deming. He helped rebuild Japan after the war, he had said, and he taught something that changed everything. It's not strength that builds systems, it's consistency. Elara carried those words with her like a compass, because the same rule applies to the soul. The mind doesn't grow through intensity, it grows through repetition. Every small act of kindness, every patient choice is like a root stretching, unseen beneath the soil. For a long time, there's nothing to see. The earth looks empty. But one day, without warning, the first green leaf breaks through. The bamboo, she remembered reading once, spends 4 long years growing its roots underground before it dares to rise. Then, in the 5th year, it shoots up dozens of feet in mere weeks. People look at it and say it grew fast, but it was slow all along. So are we. In her early days, Elara wanted to change everything at once. She wanted to wake up earlier, meditate longer, read more, write more, do more. She wanted to become everything she wasn't yet. But by the end of the week, she was exhausted. Her spirit felt dry, and her hands trembled from trying too hard. "Why did I fail?" she asked the keeper the next time he came. He smiled, looking at the horizon, because you tried to bloom before you built roots. And in that moment, Elara understood. That's how most people live, she thought. We set grand goals, promise ourselves change. And when we fall short, we mistake fatigue for failure. We think we lack willpower, but what we lack is patience. We chase leaps instead of steps. And when we stumble, we punish ourselves. But the mistake isn't in us, it's in the method. The human body was not made to run without rest. The soul, even less. Kasan is the antidote to hurry, the quiet rebellion against the culture of speed. It is the science of continuity, the philosophy of compassion for your own rhythm. Elara remembered the words of modern thinkers James Clear, P.J. Fogman, who studied change and found that it doesn't start with goals. It starts with identity. Don't say, I want to be disciplined. Say, I am someone who shows up, even if it's only for 1 minute, because every small act is a vote for the person you are becoming. And under the watchful beam of her lighthouse, Elara finally smiled for the first time in a long while. She wasn't racing. She was arriving, one breath at a time. When you do a single push-up, read 1 page, or take 1 mindful breath, it seems like nothing. But deep within, something invisible begins to change. You start to see yourself as someone who keeps promises, especially the quiet ones you make to yourself. And that, Elara would learn, is the beginning of freedom. Elara began to practice the question the old keeper had repeated, like a quiet mantra. What is the smallest improvement that fits today? Sometimes it was 1 extra glass of water. Sometimes it was turning off the lamp 10 minutes earlier. Sometimes it was offering an apology before shame could build a wall. It was never about fixing herself, it was about honoring herself. Self-respect, she learned, is not a theory. It's a sequence of small decisions whispering, I matter. And when both body and mind start to believe that you no longer need speeches to keep going, you only need to keep the thread unbroken, the one that ties you back to yourself. One late afternoon, as the sun sank low behind the sea, the keeper spoke about silence as though revealing an ancient secret. We live surrounded by noise, he said softly, and rarely hear the sound of what we truly want. A tired mind craves distraction. A healing mind seeks space, places without stimulation, where the inner house can be put back in order. Psychologically, he explained, the habit of quiet brings 2 gifts. It reduces reactivity and restores discernment. When you create daily moments of stillness, 5 minutes of slow breathing, a walk without music, or washing a single cup with your full mind present, something aligns behind your eyes. Clarity doesn't rush in, it lands. And when it lands, choices become simple, not because the world's changed, but because you changed the way you stand within it. It was on that road that the keeper introduced her to a word that frightens some and frees others. Walking alone. Not bitter loneliness, not pride disguised as independence, but the ability to sustain your own direction even when there are no maps or applause. He told her about a man who lived centuries before, someone many consider a legend, but who was flesh, doubt, and discipline. Miyamoto Musashi, not the swordsman celebrated for his duels, but the craftsman of his own spirit, who chose to live outside the comforts that could have numbed his soul. He understood that false belonging costs the truth of one's being. Musashi rejected titles, salaries, and shelter to practice a demanding form of freedom, the kind that holds you responsible for your own mind. The figure of the Ronin, said the keeper, is often romanticized as a lone wolf without direction. But the true Ronin does not wander, he chooses. He doesn't separate from the world out of bitterness, but to see it without the fog of expectations. That distinction, he said, is vital. Isolation that wounds is escape. Solitude that heals is encounter. What Musashi taught in life and in words was simple. Mastery is not achieved by leaning on the common. Mastery has no audience. It has practice. And practice is a daily fidelity to small gestures, to repetition that reveals layers, to honesty that replaces decoration with substance. The keeper spoke of Musashi's book of 5 rings: earth, water, fire, wind, and void. Earth is foundation. Know your ground, your limits, where your feet truly stand. Water as adaptation. Change shape without losing essence. Respond without hardening. Fire as engagement. Act when action is right, without confusing impulse with courage. Wind as clear critique. Study all styles send. Once understood, transcend them. And void is inner space. The mind that doesn't cling. The presence that allows fluid action. These aren't poetic ornaments, said the keeper, looking toward the horizon. They're quiet maps for any art, including the art of living. Living, in that sense, meant seeing clearly, acting with sobriety, and staying whole. But it was another of Musashi's works, written near the end of his life, that touched Elara most deeply: the path of walking alone. Not as rejection of affection, but as a commitment to one's internal axis. Short, unadorned precepts reminding: do not chase pleasure for pleasure's sake. Do not feed on resentment. Respect the sacred without outsourcing responsibility. Do not fear death. The keeper never asked her to take these as dogma. He asked her to experiment with the substance beneath them. The test, he said, would be daily. Choose what is right, even when no one is watching. Refuse excess that empties the soul. Practice quiet courage in the small detours that shape character. Psychology gives this path another name: self-governance. It's the skill of regulating emotions, directing attention, and aligning behavior with values. Not to be immune to the world, but not to be ruled by it. Elara began to see the thread connecting Kazan to lucid solitude identity. You are not what you promise in bright moments. You are what you repeat in quiet ones. And repetition that transforms is never violent. It is loving. To love yourself in this sense is not to excuse everything. It is to take responsibility without cruelty. That's why Wabi-Sabi breathes through this journey like a soft wind, accepting imperfections, repairing cracks with gold, telling your story without lies. Shame hides. Reverence integrates. When a wound becomes a chosen line in your design, the past stops dragging the present. It becomes texture. Elara made a small personal vow to practice one act each day like a shokunin, an artisan lending her soul to her work. Tie a knot with full attention. Write one sentence with honesty. Prepare a simple meal without hurry. Listen to someone without preparing a reply. None of these rewrites a life in one stroke, but all of them, repeated, rewrite the person who writes their own story. Science agrees with what art has always known. Deliberate attention reduces inner noise, strengthens the circuit of conscious choice, and quiets impulsivity. The result isn't efficiency, it's dignity. One evening, as the tide came in low and steady, Elara asked, "And what if I get lost?" The keeper smiled. He had heard that question many times, in many hearts. "If you walk with care," he said, "you may lose the path, but you won't lose your axis. When haste pushes you, sit down." When others' voices grow too loud, find your silence. When fear tries to decide, return to the smallest step that honors your values. It was a plan for difficult days. Simple, human, forgiving. Reduce the scope, keep the rhythm, preserve self-respect. 1% of return is still return, and return matters far more than a perfect victory that never comes. The night moved forward, and the moon drew thin silver cracks across the water. Elara understood she didn't need to shut out the world to open herself. She needed to open spaces within herself so she could truly be in the world. The phone could stay away for a while. Her eyes could rest without a screen. Her heart could slow without guilt. Silence stopped being a void to fill and became a presence to inhabit. In the place of anxious longing to be seen came a gentler joy, seeing better. Seeing better, the simple life that holds everything together. Seeing others beyond their masks. Seeing herself beyond the roles that habit had printed upon her, she knelt by the window, as if writing an agreement with her own soul, and promised to keep showing up. Not because the world demanded it, but because the soul blooms only through continuity. To keep showing up for her body with gentle rest and honest movement. To keep showing up for her mind with spaces of stillness that let clarity land. To keep showing up for her work with systems that save energy. To keep showing up for her connections with words that heal and apologies that arrive before pride. And to keep showing up for her own path with the calm courage of one who can walk alone when needed, walk together when true. That courage didn't beat like euphoria. It whispered like conviction. If there was one question worth carrying, it wasn't what does the world expect of me, but what is my next small step that honors who I wish to become? That question sought no stage, it sought practice. It was a compass pointing inward, guiding her toward what Musashi once called the void, and what modern psychology would call presence, the place where action arises clean, free of a noisy, unknotted from compulsion. From that point, choices become clear, not because they promise success, but because they are whole in the moment they are made. When Shihozi Elara didn't feel new, she felt whole. There was no rush, no fear of starting small again, no need for grand gestures. She finally had something better, a way of living that would not betray her on dark days. She knew that soon she would discover the name of her Nothikigaibo, that it wouldn't be a trophy to display. It would be a quiet reason to wait that belongs to the next chapter. For now, she held what fits in the palm of one hand. A small step today, another tomorrow. Roots first, presence always. The rest will come, as all true things do in the right time, in the right way, through the serene sum of what you choose to live. Before dawn, she reached the foot of the cliff where the old keeper waited by the mouth of a cave carved by the sea. It wasn't a retreat from the world, it was a return to the essential. There are places not meant for hiding, he said, but for confronting. The air there was sharp and pure, every sound seemed outlined. Inside the cave, there was nothing ornamental, only what was necessary. A mat, a candle, a single notebook. Stillness isn't the absence of life, the keeper said. It's life without noise. Elara finally understood why so many mistake solitude for weakness. Most people only know silence as punishment, not as path. But the right kind of solitude, the chosen kind, is an act of power. In it, the masks fall, leaving only what is true. Without an audience, there's no one to perform for. Without distraction, there is nowhere to run. That's when your own voice, once drowned by opinions and expectations, becomes audible again. It doesn't shout, it guides. It's the compass loss when you live to confirm what others expect. The keeper spoke of Musashi without grandeur. He chose caves not out of fear, he said, but out of measure too. Remove everything that wasn't essential so the essential could finally appear. He trained with no witnesses, wrote with no praise, painted with no promise of glory. Solitude, when fed with discipline, doesn't wither, it sharpens. He looked into the dim light and added, "Ask yourself, who are you when there is no immediate reward, no one watching, no applause or criticism? If you keep your honor there, your integrity, in the small things, then your character rests where it should." Modern psychology now confirms what Musashi lived. Without pauses, the mind slips into hyperactivity. It answers the world before consulting its own values. The habit of quiet 5 minutes of breathing, a walk without input, a single act done with full attention widens the space between impulse and choice. In that space lives freedom. The Stoics knew this too. The more you stake your worth on what lies outside your control, the less power you have within. Approval, likes, applausal are weather. And when your value depends on the weather, you become weather, too unstable, restless, tired. To silence yourself enough to hear yourself again is to reclaim emotional sovereignty. Attention stops being dragged. It begins to be directed. Elara started noticing the invisible masters trying to steer her days, the urgency of work disguised as identity, the endless feeds setting her mood, the comparisons shaping goals that weren't hers. The keeper never told her to reject the world. He told her to choose whom to serve. To walk without a master, he said, is not to despise authority. It's to decide that your life answers first to your own code. And a personal code isn't born from pretty theories. It's forged through experience, friction, and repetition like steel under fire, pressure, hammer, and patience. From that day on, Elara created a small ritual. Twice a day, she entered her cave. Sometimes a bench in the garden, sometimes a silent room, sometimes simply the decision to close her eyes and breathe. There, she asked 3 questions. What is real right now? What is mine to do? What is the smallest act that honors who I wish to be? Within days, her answer stopped sounding dramatic and started sounding practical. Send that honest message, say no without guilt, walk for 15 minutes, close the tab stealing focus, apologize before pride arrives. Solitude didente, make her still. It made her aligned. Discipline, in that light, stopped being punishment. It became nourishment, care for the axis that kept her whole. The keeper spoke at last about the price of freedom. To say no to what steals your soul is expensive, he said. Sometimes it costs comfort, sometimes understanding, sometimes reputation. But what you receive in return has no price. Authenticity. The world rarely knows what to do with a person who feels at ease alone. Such a soul cannot be bought with approval nor blackmailed by rejection. Having made peace with silence, she no longer needed to prove her worth. She lived it. Instead of chasing a seat at someone else's table, she carried her own principles, boundaries, and the quiet presences that sustained her. Elara realized how often she had confused connection with consumption. She had been linked to many, yet distant from herself. Chosen solitude reverses that logic. It reconnects you to the only companion you will never leave, your own self. At first, that reconnection can sting. It exposes addictions, escapes, and noise. But with patience, it returns something no distraction can offer. Perspective. You begin to see the social game without needing to play it at all costs. You choose when to join and when to step away, not from superiority, but from freedom. Not from disdain, but from clarity. Then came the question that cuts and heals at once. Who is your master today? Your employer who defines your worth. The image you fight to maintain. The fear of being misunderstood. The algorithm that dictates your mood. Each of these invisible lords pulls a thin string. To walk without a master in the modern world does not mean breaking from everyone. It means seeing the strings and deciding which deserve to remain. It means saying yes where there is alignment and no where there is silent corruption of your axis. That in itself requires structure, hours for deep focus, rituals that guard energy, small commitments that keep continuity even through storms. Once, Elara had searched for perfect maps. Now she began to write a simple, humble code of her own. Do what I say, I'll do in the measure I can. Never bargain with the sleep that sustains the mind. Speak truth kindly. Move the body every day. Keep a space without screens. Practice a craft with full attention. And when in doubt, take the smallest step that makes me more honest than I was a moment ago. None of it was spectacular, and precisely because it wasn't, it lasted. The keeper warned her. There will be tests, invitations to hand your steering wheel to someone else, to trade freedom for validation, to bend your principles for a shortcut. He reminded her of Musa. He did not win because he was stronger. He won because he refused to fight on other people as terms. He chose his ground, his moment, his values. That is the heart of self-mastery, to decide the game instead of being played. By the end of her retreat, the cave no longer felt austere. It felt honest. It didn't reflect greatness. It reflected consistency. Elara left with a new serenity, not the absence of fear, but friendship with silence. She didn't feel isolated. She felt entire. When she returned to the lighthouse, life looked the same. Tasks, routines, conversations. What had changed was the source from which she drew before acting. Instead of rushing to be seen, she chose to see. Instead of molding herself to expectations, she shaped her day from what she knew was truly hers. The world remained noisy, but now its noise passed through wiser filters, and quietly, a new question began to rise. If I can hear my own voice clearly, what is the calm reason that makes me rise each morning? The answer would not come in slogans, it would come in gestures, in people, in work that fit her soul. The way worn shoes learn the shape of the foot. The keeper called that answer ikigai, not a distant destiny, but a way of living that unites what you love, what you do well, what the world needs, and what sustains your life. But that, he said, deserves a chapter of its own. Before seeking it, one must keep what was already learned, the stillness that reveals, the solitude that sharpens, the code that sustains. That night, as the lanterns dimmed, Elara placed her notebook over her heart and breathed as if sealing a pact. She didn't promise to become great. She promised to keep returning to herself, to the place where choices are clean and even the smallest steps pointed toward true north. Freedom did not sound like a shout. It sounded like comfortable silence, and in the center of that silence, at last, there was space for the next discovery, a purpose that doesn't tire because it fits daily into the way one lives. Later, as dusk leaned into night, Elara found the keeper seated at the cave's entrance with a small notebook across his knees. He ran his fingers over the cover, like greeting an old friend. Near the end of his life, he said, Musashi wrote a short document, only 21 lines. He called it Dakad, the way of walking alone. It's not a text meant to please, it's a blade meant to carve away what's false. He closed his eyes for a moment and added, each line is less a commandment than a mirror. It asks for no applause, only courage. Elara understood then. Some texts aren't written to comfort, but to awaken. The keeper read one line aloud, letting the words breathe. Do not seek pleasure for its own sake. In a world built on stimulation, comfort, and distraction, it felt like swimming against the current. It isn't about demonizing pleasure, he explained. It's about not letting it steer the ship. Pleasure passes, principles remain. When pleasure drives, the mind strays. When principle drives, pleasure finds its rightful place without taking the helm. Another line came like a cup of cold water. Accept everything as it is. That's not passivity, he said. That's presence. Acceptance is not giving up. It's beginning from what's real. Only from the real can strategy be born. The energy we waste arguing with the moment is the energy we lack to act clearly. Water overcomes rock, not by fighting it, but by aligning with it until it finds a passage. To accept is to plant your feet on the ground that exists, and only then move. Then came the sentence few dare face without lowering their gaze. Do not fear death. Musashi wrote it knowing the taste of risk. It was not bravado, but lucidity. When death ceases to be the enemy, life ceases to be postponed. Ideas can be spoken. Truths must be lived. Those who don't live for a fear of loss lose life by not living it. Here, courage is not noise. It is the silence of someone doing what is right even when unseen. Elara sat quietly, as if measuring a river before crossing. How do I turn lines into life? She asked. The keeper smiled slowly. Code, he said, not pretty beliefs, but lines you keep when they become inconvenient. Belief without practice is opinion. Code with practice becomes a spine. It's what holds you upright when everything trembles. Musashi owned no titles of the world, but he had this, a way of being that didn't shift with the weather. He handed her a blank page. No screens, he said. Paper that weighs in your hands. At the top she wrote, What do I stand for? Don't write what sounds beautiful, he told her. Write what's true. What would you do if no one could see? No applause, no criticism, no reward. Elara took a long breath. Then, slowly, 3 simple lines appeared, imperfect, but hers. I will speak truth gently, even when it costs me. I will show up every day, especially when I don't want to. I will not sell my time or attention to those who do not respect my access. The keeper nodded slowly. 3 lines are enough to begin, he said. The rest of the work is to live them. He explained that living by a code doesn't make you rigid. It makes you reliable to yourself. When life turns chaotic, you don't have to guess how to act. You return to the lines. When emotion pulls you off balance, you anchor. When the world tries to seduce you with shallow comfort or distract you with glitter, your code keeps the edge sharp. Elara understood there would be a cost. Sometimes saying no to opportunities that misalign. Sometimes walking away from those who don't honor your path. Sometimes nights spent questioning if it's worth it, but the reward had its own rare price. To look in the mirror and say, I know who I am. To walk as a Ronin is not to live without a master and without discipline. It's to live without a master and with discipline. It's rejecting external control without rejecting internal responsibility. The keeper opened another door. Readiness. Being alone doesn't mean being unprepared, he said. The path of the Ronin is not an escape from the world. It has readiness for it. He told her that Musashi lived through wars and chaos, yet sustained within himself a calm that no environment could shake. He trained the mind for clarity under pressure. The keeper continued, In Zen, this state is called Mushin, the mind without disorder. It isn't the absence of thoughts, it's the absence of noise, immediate and appropriate action, not born from impulse, but from presence. No rigid script, no paralysis. To see, to decide, to respond. For the first time, Elara began to see her days as fields of training. The delayed message, the harsh comment, the missed expectation. Each moment offered 2 roads, to react and spiral, or to observe, breathe, and respond. The keeper wove in the wisdom of Stoicism. You have power over your mind, not over events. When the response is chosen, the world remains the world. But the way you walk through it changes. Musashi didn't train only the blade. He practiced painting, calligraphy, sculpture, and strategy. If you know the way broadly, the keeper quoted, you see it in all things. Each discipline mirrored the same principle. Calm focus, clean gesture, no wasted motion. In daily life, this principle became practical. Protect your attention as sacred. Reduce digital noise. Create small rituals. Water upon waking. Body, motion, intentional breathing. Writing 1 line. working in short, focused blocks, being fully present in conversation. Stillness here wasn't inaction, it was clear action, born from choice instead of compulsion. How do I strengthen this muscle? Elara asked. Do not outsource your peace, the keeper replied. Don't wait for the world to calm before you do. Train your nervous system. Tolerable cold, deliberate silence, honest physical effort, conscious pause. Remove distractions that compete with what matters. Face discomfort on purpose. Moderate, repeated discomfort forges stability. Clarity under pressure is not luck, it's habit. Gradually, Elara noticed her code shaping her smallest choices. Speaking truth gently softened conversations, showing up when she didn't want to turn promises into rails. Guarding her time and attention restored depth to her work and tenderness to her bonds. None of it demanded spectacle, only coherence. And coherence, lived day by day, dissolved her greatest doubt. Am I on the right path? There was no longer absolute certainty, but there was alignment, and alignment was enough to sleep in peace. The keeper closed the notebook and placed it in her hands. The world is full of scripts you didn't write. Some promise safety, others shine. Before you accept any of them, ask, whom am I serving when I say yes? Serving what diverts you costs dearly. It costs you. Serving what aligns also costs comfort, approval, predictability. But it returns what nothing else can buy, wholeness. On her walk back to the lighthouse, Elara understood Musashi's invitation with new clarity. The Dakot wasn't a list to memorize. It was a daily rehearsal. It needed no sword, no mountain, no cave. It required only a renewed decision to stop living passively and begin writing one's own book of rules, short, honest, practical. Now, not tomorrow. Because the longer you delay defining who you are, the more the world tries to define it for you. That night, before closing her eyes, she rewrote her 3 lines and added a 4th. When I don't know what to do, I'll take the smallest step that honors who I wish to be. She smiled inwardly. It wasn't grand. It was alive. And in the silence before sleep, she felt something simple and final. Stillness is a superpower in a noisy world. It doesn't make you cold. It makes you ready. It doesn't separate you from the world. It gives you a more human way to stand within it. Tomorrow, she thought, the question her keeper had been preparing would begin. If the mind can be steady and the code can guide me, what is the quiet reason that makes me rise each morning? The name of that answer was It wouldn't come as a prize. It would come as a way of living that fits every single day. As she crossed the stone courtyard beneath the darkened tiles of the temple, the night spread like still water. Outwardly, her life seemed in order. Routines, duties, promises kept. Inwardly, a quiet emptiness stirred. The keeper watched her approach and said softly, some lives shine on the outside, but echo on the inside. They are often lives lived by someone else's script. He spoke of Musashi, not with myth, but with respect. He never made that mistake, the keeper said. Not because he was rich, nor because he was praised, but because his life was his own. And that, in the end, made all the difference. To walk without a master isn't romance, it's renunciation. You let go of certainty, comfort, and easy understanding. People will call you lost, strange, arrogant, naive. Some days, you'll almost agree. On others, you'll feel a quiet realization. You are free. This freedom doesn't arrive with applause. It arrives with silence, the kind of silence only a truly sovereign soul recognizes as home. True freedom is not merely choosing what you want. It is being able to say no to what you don't want. And that no is costly. Sometimes it costs a well-paying job that drives the soul. Sometimes it costs disappointing your parents because your path is one they cannot see. Sometimes it costs lonely nights where you'd rather be alone than surrounded by those who don't see your real face. But that price buys something rare: authenticity. Once you've tasted it, you can no longer pretend. Musashi proved it was possible to be powerful without power, respected without seeking attention, and to walk alone without losing purpose in today's world. Walking without a master means living intentionally, knowing your values so clearly that no one needs to tell you who you are. Building a life that reflects your principles, especially when it resembles no one else's. Then the keeper asked the question that hung between them like a bell: who or what is your master now? Your job, your social image, the fear of being misunderstood, the hunger to be loved. These forces wear ordinary faces but steer decisions, shape days, and quietly pull you away from who you could become. To walk without a master is to own your time, your attention, your decisions. It's not ignoring advice, it's choosing when to listen and why. It's standing before your life and saying, "It's mine," even if no one understands, even if no one applauds. Integrity is not granted, it is claimed. The keeper was honest. "You will be tested," he said. "The path without a master isn't paved. It's quiet, uncertain, sometimes steep. You'll be tempted to hand over the wheel, to trade freedom for validation, to bend your principles for convenience." He paused, eyes glinting like lanterns. Remember Musashi. He didn't win because he was just stronger. He won because he refused to fight on other people's terms. He chose the ground, the moment, the values. That triad made him unmovable. Elara recalled a line said to be from Musashi's final writings: "Do not build your life upon comfort, build it upon character." To serve what misaligns with the soul feels safe, but it weakens within. To serve what aligns is demanding, but it strengthens. And so return the question that shifts every path: what would your life look like if no invisible master guided it? No employer defining your worth? No peer pressure shaping your choices? No algorithm dictating your beliefs? No trend scripting your voice? Only you, responsible, awake, free. Few will ever experience that, not because it's impossible, but because it's true. And truth, almost always, is what's hardest to live. Musashi walked that path until the end. Alone, yes, but never lost. Walking without a master is not walking without direction. Paradoxically, it asks for more structure, more clarity, more discipline than a life steered from the outside. When no one tells you what to do, it becomes your responsibility to know who you are and how you will live. That is why, even while rejecting external control, Musashi followed a rigorous path. A code not inherited, not copied, not imposed. Forged in direct experience, sound judgment, discipline, and solitude, like steel under fire, pressure, and repetition. One quiet evening, the keeper handed Elara a blank page and a pencil. "Write at the top, what do I stand for? Don't write what sounds pretty. Write what is true. What would you do if no one could see? If there were no applause, no criticism, no prizes? If the only person to impress were you, a few months from now?" Elara thought long and wrote short. 3 lines. Not elegant, authentic. The keeper nodded. "It isn't for publishing. It's for practicing. Living a code won't make you rigid. It makes you reliable to yourself. When the world trembles, you don't guess, you return to the lines. In an emotional storm, you returned to the principles. When the comfort of ease calls your name, your code keeps the edge sharp. There would be a cost, saying no to misaligned opportunities, stepping away from people who belittle your path. Nights of doubt, and still, the reward was rare. To look in the mirror and say, I know who I am. To walk like a Ronin isn't merely to walk alone. It is to walk honestly. No master, never no discipline. Refused the control, never refused responsibility. The keeper led her to the wind-swept ledge above the sea, and without grand words, proposed simple drills. First, stop outsourcing your peace. Don't wait for the world to quiet down so you can feel calm. Train your nervous system, slow breathing, brief cold exposure, steady movement, minutes of living silence. Second, guard your attention as sacred. Reduce digital noise, close the invisible tabs, create clear windows of focus. A clear mind needs clear space. Third, face challenge on purpose. Clarity under pressure is habit, not talent. Choose moderate, voluntary discomfort, the hard conversation, the necessary no, the project that demands presence. Each time you stay grounded instead of spiraling, you become powerful. Each time you listen before reacting, you become dangerous in the best sense, trustworthy in a storm. Elara began to see the warrior's training as a daily art, not a duel. Delays unfair criticism, plan set shift, all of it. Practice fields, Mushin, the keeper said, isn't an empty mind. It's a mind without disorder. See, choose, respond, clear action, deliberate, born from presence, not compulsion. He threaded stoicism through it. You have power over your mind, not over events. Life stays life. What changes is the way you cross it. Day by day, ideas became gestures. Elara spoke truth gently. She showed up even when she didn't want to. She protected her time. She cut excess. She apologized before pride arrived. She repeated small rites that kept her whole. The outer noise remained, but her need to explain herself to everyone began to fade. Where anxiety once lived, alignment appeared. Not absolute certainty. Enough peace. On a short breeze night, the keeper led her to the water's edge. Lanterns shimmered in the dark like quiet constellations. If freedom is yours, he said, and your code sustains you, one question remains, the one that gives your morning's direction. Why do you rise? He called the answer, not a slogan, not a title, not a distant destination. Ikigai is a way of living that fits what you love, what you do well, what the world needs, and what sustains your life. Not a goal for someday, but a way to wake every day. Elara understood. Freedom without purpose becomes fatigue. Purpose without freedom becomes captivity. The mature path unites the two: sovereignty within, service without. And like Kazan, the discovery of Ikigai begins small, concrete, daily. The keeper smiled. Tomorrow, we'll look for your intersection. Not in theories, but in steps that already fit your day. Elara breathed deeply, not to swell the chest, but to open it. Outside, everything was the same. Inside, something rare. The feeling of being at home. No invisible masters pulling strings. A short code holding her choices. Ready, at last, to ask honestly, what done by me, in my way, at my pace, serves the world and keeps me alive? The answer won't arrive with thunder. It will arrive as everything of value has on this path. Quiet, consistent, true. They walked the garden's most silent curve together. The world beyond still sounded like a marketplace of voices, paths for sale, promises of shortcuts, ready-made maps. The modern Ronin doesn't reject everything, the keeper said. She sees and chooses better. Not rebellion for its own sake, alignment. To remember who you are while everything around you tries to make you forget. You don't need to shave your head, vanish, or become a monk, he added with a small smile. You need to choose small, consistent choices that bring you toward authenticity and away from conformity. Elara nodded, and the keeper made the air concrete. Questioning isn't denial, it's awakening. Instead of running on autopilot, ask, why do I want what I say I want? Who gave me this idea? What is my definition of success? What would I do if no one watched? These questions are tools, not rhetoric. With them, you sift work, routines, relationships, expectations. What's yours remains. What's only noise leaves. Choose enough solitude to hear yourself. Not always, but regularly. A day a week with the phone far away. Slow steps, a notebook that accepts whatever comes. Clarity doesn't sprout from the infinite scroll. It grows from silence. Live a code. 3 lines are enough. If true, keep them visible on the mirror, in the wallet, at the day's beginning. A code isn't decoration. It's a compass. When life tightens, it shows you how to go on with integrity, clarity, discipline. Travel light. Musashi carried little not from poverty, but for freedom. Today that means asking, what weighs me down? What clutters my desk, my mind, my heart? Which subscriptions don't I use? Which obligations drain me? Which ideas no longer serve me? Let go. Simplify. Freedom rarely lives in excess. It lives in clarity. Stay adaptable. The old Ronin had no fixed role. The modern one doesn't either. Jobs change. Technologies shift. Contexts move. Choose resilience over rigidity. Recalibrate without panic. Learn without drama. Adjust without guilt. Survival favors the flexible, not the fixed. The keeper rested a hand on her shoulder. Difficulties are mirrors, he said. Do not seek pain, but use the pain that comes. Every failure a teacher, every frustration a data point. Instead of numbing, face it, breathe, and ask, what is this showing me? Sometimes the obstacle I ascend beyond the path. It is the path train. The mind, in a world of infinite content, information is cheap, wisdom is rare. Read philosophy and fiction, yes, but above all, write a few lines a day, not to be beautiful, but to be honest. Those who write, see. Those who see, choose. Those who choose, govern themselves. Detox your attention. You cannot live like a Ronin if your mind belongs to a screen. You will not train stillness if your thumb never lets go. Digital detachment isn't erasing everything. It's controlling what enters. Limit notifications. Reduce noise. Prefer signal to phone. Create more than you consume. Attention is energy. Energy is life. Do not give it away for free. Elara drank these words like water, and in the hush that followed, the lighthouse lamp hummed, steady, alive, waiting for dawn. Tomorrow, the keeper said, we begin the work of Ikigai. Not as a speech, but as a sequence of living steps, small enough to do, true enough to last. She closed her eyes and felt the sea breathe below. A page, code, a compass. Roots first, presence always, purpose next. Elara drank in the keeper's words. Like water, these weren't slogans. They were tools. Honed day after day, they build presence, integrity, and freedom. She remembered the nights when her life looked perfect from the outside but felt hollow within. She saw how much of her soul's idleness came from borrowed metrics, followers, titles, approvals. The keeper made it simple. Your job is not your identity. Your productivity is not your soul. You are not here to impress the world, but to become yourself. Walking this way can hurt, saying no costs. Choosing silence when the noise calls is frightening. But as you walk, you begin to recognize other walkers. Few, discreet, with understanding eyes. You don't need many. You need them to be real. The keeper asked her to breathe and write. Where am I still performing? Where am I still following instead of choosing? What must I let go? What must I build? Elara wrote slowly, as if listening. When she finished, the peace she felt didn't depend on ready-made answers. It depended on having begun. There is no required stage, the keeper said. The modern Ronin-esque battlefield is interior, against the rush to conform, against the noise that drowns clarity, against the temptation to live for applause. Day after day, choose presence over panic, purpose over distraction, the real over the easy. That is the way, and that is how one can walk. At parting, the keeper told how Musashi ended his life. No grand stage, no final duel, no audience. He withdrew, wrote what mattered, and left clarity as legacy. Did he die alone? No. He died rich in experience, principle, intention. Not inflated by ego, but complete from giving himself to the path. He did not wait to be understood. He lived. He refined. He practiced, and he reminded us that the point is not to win other people's games, but to see through them and walk your own. Elara understood. In the end, when status, possessions, and reputations fall away, what remains is who you chose to be. Walking alone is not getting lost. It is forging your own map. To wake and ask, not what should I do, but what is real for me. To build from the inside out. To risk not fitting in so you can finally belong to yourself. Rarely comfortable, almost never, but true. The keeper led her back to the water. In the mirror of the lake, Elara's soul tenderly. The marks of time, the chipped rim of a stone, the worn surface of an old clay jar. Have you noticed how beautiful time's touch can be? He asked. There's an entire philosophy devoted to it. Wabi-Sabi, not just an aesthetic, a way of seeing. It welcomes the imperfect, the impermanent, the incomplete in objects, relationships, and in us. Why does it matter? He pressed, looking into her eyes. Because Wabi-Sabi allows your scars to stop being reasons to hide and become signs of life. It teaches you to find elegance in the simple, richness in the modus, depth in what time has left. And when you learn to see the world this way, you learn to see yourself this way. Elara smiled with her eyes. Maybe, she thought, this is the next stretch of the path. Accept what is tend, what can be, and honor the marks that tell your story. The keeper nodded, as if hearing the thought. Then let us open Wabi-Sabi slowly, with respect, and let it rest in the way you sleep, wake, and love. At dawn, they walked to the old tea room. The wooden door opened with a faint rasp, as if every fiber held a memory. The ceramic bowl had a visible chip along its rim. The bamboo ladle was crooked by birth. Nothing there looked perfect, and yet everything felt exact. The keeper poured the tea, set the bowl in Elara's hands, and said, "Here, perfection is not the goal. It is one pressure less. What matters is the meeting. Everything that arrives with its story, and thus it is enough." Wabi-Sabi offers a view where chasing the flawless stops being virtue and becomes interference. Culture pushes us into showcases, performance, image, curated life. In that pushing and pulling, we lose the flavor of what is already here. Integrating Wabi-Sabi into daily life doesn't add layers. It removes noise. It trades anxiety for appreciation. A chipped cup stops being a defect and becomes a marker of time. A faded photograph stops being ruined and becomes evidence of a road. The ordinary becomes a source of quiet, and the home begins to tell your story, not a catalog's. This view grows from Zen, simplicity, authenticity in the tea ceremony Chinoyu. Every gesture is a reminder, presence before results, a cloth folded, water poured, steam rising and disappearing, a dance of attention. Pieces do not match by symmetry. They match by breathing room. Each irregularity composes a harmony, possible only because of those irregularities. You leave remembering that beauty doesn't live in the eternal, but in what passes. abstract, you might ask. How can appreciating worn wood change a life? Wabi-Sabi's power is psychological. It shifts focus from should-be to is. That shift reduces stress, loosens comparison, and increases self-compassion. Instead of forcing everything to fit an ideal, you adjust your gaze to fit reality. And when reality is welcomed, the body slows. Less rumination, more presence, less vigilance, more relief. Nature already lives this way. Twisted branches, asymmetric rocks, coastlines that never repeat themselves. It's the very misfit that takes our breath away. In Japanese aesthetics, this appears as Kintsugi repairing ceramics with lacquer and gold, highlighting the cracks instead of hiding them. The piece doesn't return to how it was. It becomes something else, more honest. Therapeutically, it's potent. Our fractures can become lines of strength when given care, not shame. Traditional gardens follow the same intuition. Past that curve, stones placed asymmetrically, moss advancing without a ruler. The goal is not to tame nature, but to converse with it. To look at such a garden is to train ourselves to accept the unplanned, and by extension, to accept ourselves. In life, two tight illusions begin to fall. That everything must look new, and that everything must look perfect. Embracing imperfection isn't abandoning excellence. It's trading perfectionism for human precision. In practice and in clinics, rigid perfectionism walks hand in hand with anxiety and corrosive Wabi-Sabi adds an antidote, imperfect and still entire. When the goal shifts from flawless to aligned, the nervous system cooperates. You move better because you stop sabotaging yourself in service of an unreachable standard. Elara raised the bowl. The chip touched her lips like a gentle reminder. Careful. Ikipa smiled. The object teaches the gesture. In accepting the broken edge, she changed the way she treated herself. Less harshness, more tenderness. What began with a bowl spilled into conversations, into work, into sleep. The heart learns fast when the body feels. Let's make it concrete, quiet practices too. Weave Wabi-Sabi into a day by the sea. The scene ritual. Choose a worn object each day. A mug, a penciled book, a threadbare shirt. Observe for 1 minute. Texture, stains, scar. Name softly one story it carries. This microrite trains the brain to value the lived, and it will carry that lens back to you. Inner Kintsugi write a brief passage about a hard moment in your life. Underline the cracks. Beside each note, what grew from it? A boundary, a skill, a care. Don't romanticize pain. Recognize the transformation. Weekly repetition reduces shame and strengthens coherence of identity. Rooms with pauses give each room 1 point of visual silence, a surface without clutter, a simple object with space around it. A breathing home teaches the body to breathe. Fewer stimuli, mori, presence. Tea in your style once a day. Hot water, a simple drink, the same 3 gestures, the same vessel. Hands fully in what they do. Call it 1 minute of now. Repetition creates a daily access. Error as signal when you make a mistake. Trade, I ruined everything for I found a edge. Ask 3 questions. What does this show me? What's the smallest adjustment? How will I mark this so I remember? You train the brain to learn, not to punish. Visible slowing walk 10% slower along one stretch of your day. The body's speed educates the mind. Wabi-Sabi has a cadence, unhurried, whole. The wear and repair routine. Fix one small thing each week. A button, a messy app, a loose hinge, a clumsy process. Repairing declares, I value what I already have. This rewires the impulse to discard objects, relationships, versions of yourself. Notice how these practices braid aesthetics and psychology. By seeing beauty in what is real, you reduce the inner friction between how you live and how you imagine you should live. The result is not passivity, it is energy release for what matters. Authenticity replaces performance, presence replaces endless correction. Elara stood at the lighthouse window as dawn unstitched the horizon. The sea breathed, de la, hummed. In her hands a bowl with a small golden scar, imperfect, and exactly enough. Elara finished her tea. The keeper turned the bowl so the chip faced them both. We are like this, he said. Marks left by time. The merit isn't to pretend they don't exist, but to care for them so they shine without cutting. At the door, a breeze turned the leaves as if turning a page. To embrace transience is to accept that life is a dance, not a photograph. Everything changes, and that change keeps the music playing. Wabi-Sabi invites a lighter step, a little less anxiety, a kindergazi, a quieter home, a truer story. When you stop spending strength trying to be eternal, you have strength to be entire now. Here, in the now, beauty is everywhere. In the glaze that failed on the ceramic, in the floorboard that creaks, in the laugh that isn't perfect, in the sentence that stumbles and still reaches the heart. There's a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. They walked the long wooden corridor. Each plank gave a soft, friendly pop beneath their feet. See, the keeper said, pointing to a petal already fallen on the stone. The pressure for perfection doesn't only fail, it steals. While we polish everything, we miss the shine of what already is. Elara touched the petal. There was ease in it, and yet the mind trained on goals had almost hurried past. Wabi-Sabi shifts the lens from should be to is. In a world that asks for performance in work, appearance, and feeds that shift is, you don't heap on new tasks. You refine your scene. Control relaxes. Real satisfaction. A chipped mug begins to tell of the mornings that shaped it. A faded photo holds a summer no one can steal. The ordinary becomes contemplation. This view has Zen roots, simplicity, authenticity. In the tea room, the process matters more than the rite. Each gesture, each utensil with signs of use, completes a harmony in which imperfections don't interfere. Without them, there would be no music at all. Psychologically, the lesson is direct. When we accept what is, the nervous system leaves threat mode and returns to learning, bonding, digesting. Acceptance isn't passivity. It is a lucid starting point. Only what is recognized can be adjusted. You might ask, how does appreciating worn wood change a life? Because it trains a kind of attention that falls on everything. The eye that honors patina begins to honor your story, your body's story, your relationship's story. Anxiety loosens when the ruler stops being the ideal and becomes the truth of the moment. Nature has always taught this. Twisted trunks, asymmetric rocks, coastlines that never repeat, all lives in the not perfect. In art, this appears as Kintsugi mending with gold that emphasizes the crack as part of identity. It doesn't hide the damage, it transforms it into design. Taken inward, it reduces shame and increases coherence. What broke you also shaped you. Another pillar of Wabi-Sabi. Cherry blossoms are beautiful because their time is brief. Psychologically, this softens to knots. The belief that pain is forever and the illusion that joy must be guaranteed. Everything that doesn't make us cold, it makes us present. If it hurts, knowing it passes gives breath. If it's good, knowing it passes grows gratitude and the desire to savor. By the lake, a ring of ripples widened and vanished. So it is with days, the keeper said. If you grip them, they slip. If you feel them, they move through you. Impermanence isn't fatalism. It's emotional literacy. It lets you feel sadness without panic and joy without possession. Admitting the dance has entrances and exits makes life steadier. Precisely. Because we stop demanding total stability, Wabi-Sabi, in everyday steps. Gentle, workable, real, one worn thing. Each day choose a used object. Look for 60 seconds. Texture, scratch, scar, whisper. One story it carries. In a Kintsugi, write one brittle scene from your past. Underline the crack. Draw the gold line beside it. What strength grew there? One minute off now. Hot water, simple cup, 3 repeated gestures. Hands fully present. Same time if you can, room with a pause. Give each room one quiet surface. Space teaches breath. Seal the joy. When something good happens, close your eyes and note 3 sensory details. That's how joy sticks a hoe as edgy. Replace our ruined day with, I found an edge. Ask, what does this show? What's the smallest adjustment? How will I mark it? Travel lighter? Weekly? Release one item? Subscription? Obligation? That only weighs you down. This too will pass. Use the phrase not to shrink feelings, but to give them shape. Elara lifted the chipped bowl to her lips with extra care and felt the chip become a teacher. The object educated the hand educated the mind. That tenderness began to spill into conversations, into how she closed the day, into the hurry she was on. Embracing imperfection isn't abandoning excellence. It's dropping the fantasy of total control that makes us ill. Excellence, in Wabi-Sabi, is human precision. Act with presence. Adjust with humility. Respect the cycle. This posture builds resilience, not the hardness that denies pain, but the elasticity that returns to form after impact. Impermanence, in turn, recalibrates priorities. If everything changes, what matters is how we live. White does attention on what nourishes, courage to say no to what consumes, tenderness for the marks time leaves. We don't need constant happiness. We need room to ride the tide without losing ourselves in each wave. The keeper pressed the fallen paddle between Elara's notebook pages, a reminder that nothing lasts, and therefore everything deserves to be fully lived. The freedom to stop polishing everything made a new piece. Less effort to appear, more power to be. And in that calm, Wabi-Sabi ceased to be concept and became habit. A way of seeing that changes what we see and, slowly, who we are. When night fell, the garden wasn't less beautiful. It was different. And that is the final lesson of this part. If you stop demanding that life freeze, it offers something better than perfection. Presence, affection, truth. Beauty lives in the cracks and in the light, insisting to pass through them. They walk beneath air rinsed by rain. Puddles held the sky. The earth smelled newly turned. Notice how everything comes and goes, the keeper said, touching the water. Ripples opened and gathered back as if life itself were breathing. Elara felt it. Accepting impermanence steals nothing. It returns the moment. When the mind stops arguing with what already is, the body rests, breath deepens, thought clears. Grace stops being a pretty word and becomes physiology. Less tension, more presence, simpler decisions. Back on the Ngawa, the keeper gestured to a plain bowl marked by years. In simplicity, there is truth. This wasn't an invitation to lack, but to the richness of focus. In a world offering more than anyone can carry, simplification is courage. Remove what distracts so the essential can bloom. A vessel with the Maker-S marks speaks more than an over-polished object, and the same happens to the mind when we clear the desk. Quiet the notifications, reduce heavy promises, tend the house, and inner space returns. Say no to the superfluous, and you are saying yes to what needs care. So a day may begin gently, without needing to prove anything. Before any screen lights up, rest your eyes on a small detail. The light through the curtain, the coffee's steam, the texture under your hand. Name softly what you see, a simple way to call the now. Back inside, when something goes off plan, whisper that the day only changed shape, and ask what is born from that. Mood adjusts. The mind finds alternatives. The heart doesn't have to harden. At night, small things turn to gold. The chipped cup that witnessed important talk, the sentence that tripped and made everyone laugh, the plan that became a kinder path. Write a few lines. Teach your brain to value what is real, not what is perfect. This is how perfectionism loses command and self-regard stops depending on a showcase. The keeper closed a simple notebook where a pressed petal now lived. To remember nothing lasts, and therefore everything is worth feeling. From then on, imperfection, simplicity, and transience stopped being ideas and became ways of touching the world. When the quiet world fit inside her chest, the keeper asked a question that truly moves a life. Why do you rise? Some days we call laziness what is really misalignment. Borrowed goals exhaust us. Tasks without meaning weigh us down. When purpose meets path, energy stops pushing and begins pulling. The old word for that meeting is ikigai. The intersection of what lights you within, what your hands can do, what eases a real need around you, and what sustains your life. It needn't be perfect or final. It needs to be alive. Sometimes it shows up in a modest act, a small class, a neighbor's help, a handmade creation in the afternoon's gap. What matters is that it speaks in your voice. Purpose breathes best when it becomes habits with soul, not grand feats forced into being simple acts repeated with love. A useful explanation each day if you teach, a few bars at night if you compose, a message of presence to someone who needs it if you care. When the entry is soft, tools at hand, space prepared, distractions far, action arrives with less friction. Quiet trust grows from small promises kept. The body learns that returning is safe. The mind begins to desire the next step. Doubts will come. Fears will visit. Don't crown them kings. Greet them at the porch. Name what you feel. Breathe until the wave lowers. Then choose the smallest act that keeps the course. When failures come, practice inner Kintsugi. Underline the crack and paint the learning in gold. Your self-image stops being fragile. It becomes elastic. The mistake becomes a teacher, and the path continues. Elara, patient by nature and precise with her hands, discovered that patience counts as much as technique. Pouring tea isn't only hot water, the keeper said. It's presence poured into cups. The next day, a paper on the door. Tea lessons, 3 seats. No fanfare, just truth repeated, small, steady. With time, a day finds its axis. Mornings greet the body with simple movement. The focus block guards the task that talks with purpose. Evening returns attention to those we love and to ourselves. Attention becomes sacred. Less noise, more signal. Community shrinks in number and grows in quality. A few eyes that understand are worth more than many that only watch. The modern Ronin doesn't flee the world. She chooses better where to step. Before sleep, let a gentle question rest on the pillow. What's more, true step calls me tomorrow. Not the heroic, the true. Maybe open the file, send a message, tune the instrument, open the window. Small steps can be trusted. They grow roots. And roots, in time, hold flowers. The keeper smiled when the house fell quiet. When light enters through a crack, it isn't to hide the fracture, it's to honor it. Elara nodded. She did not need to be perfect, only present. She did not need to run, only walk. She did not need another master, only to hear her own. If you carry one thing into the night, carry this. Begin the day by feeling the world with all five senses. For a breath, offer yourself one proof of who you wish to be. And at dusk, notice the shine that crossed the seams. The rest, life will teach while walking. And tomorrow, when your eyes open, may they find you lighter. Because what weighed you down has already begun to fall behind. The hurry, the comparison, the borrowed scripts. What remains is yours. Presence, purpose, and peace. Sleep now, the lighthouse stands. The sea breathes, and somewhere within you, a quiet light keeps watch.